Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we're going to talk about people who have a life of service. Now, we all know there's no random acts. Even though we don't know why something occurs, everything occurs for a reason. If we're paying attention, that reason will become clear. For my guest, Larry Frederick, his reason is to save lives. Let me tell you something about Larry. Larry served as a 17-year-old in the Marines in Vietnam. He then spent a career in law enforcement. And the life-changing moment for him was an accident that should have taken his life. And that accident provided the path to his most important accomplishment. Now, Larry is going to be a contributing author to my upcoming book, Business Secrets from the Battlefield to the Boardroom. In fact, Larry was the very first person to volunteer to be involved in this project. So I'm indebted to Larry for getting the ball rolling here. The book will be available in March, and it is stories written by veteran spouses, parents, and supporters telling their story. So let's meet Larry Frederick. Larry, welcome again to Life Altering Events.
Thank you, Frank. Ever since I was a little boy, and I'm just going to show this, my mother raised me correctly, and I was taught by her how important a life of service really is for us to share with others. And she shared with me as she followed the teachings of Jesus Christ in her life. And she taught how he had died for us. Now, normally that might not be a big deal, but it was really confirmed to me when I was 12 years old, as I was watching my mother, Adela, die from cancer of the pancreas and liver. Many evenings during those 3 months that it took, the last 3 months, I would rub her cold feet and she would talk to me. Mm-hmm. She shared her testimony of Jesus Christ with me many, many times. And 5 days before she died, she had a dream that she told me about, and I would like to share it with you. Can you imagine a 12-year-old boy saying, and his mother going, "Hey, come over here. I want to tell you something. Joe, I had a dream last night. I know I'm going to die soon, and I'm going to have to leave you. I don't want to go, but I have to go." Then she told me her dream, how she was climbing a steep, rugged, narrow mountain trail with a dirt wall straight up on her left and a deep, dark canyon straight down on the right. She could feel the darkness pulling her back down, yet she wouldn't give up. She kept trying. As she climbed, she said she felt so tired and so worn out that she was almost ready to give up many, many times. Yet she didn't give up. Each time she looked up, she saw a speck of light at the top of the mountain, and she kept climbing toward it. And every time she would feel down and out, she would look up and find the strength to go a few steps further. Well, by now the light was getting bigger, and she could see that it was an open doorway with pure, bright light streaming out of it. As she got closer to it, the darkness kept pulling her backwards. So she said, I decided to give it one last try with every ounce of strength that I had left. And she reached out with her right hand to try just to touch the bright light. It was then that a brilliant white hand came out of the light and grasped her right hand. When it did, the darkness instantly disappeared, and she said she felt an overwhelming, calming peace that she had felt before. And then she again bore her testimony of Jesus Christ to me. Then crying, she said goodbye. And she told me she had to go, that she couldn't stay with me, that she had to leave me. Yet she knew that she would be able to watch over me, even though she didn't know exactly how that was going to work.
Mm-hmm.
But because of her strong belief in Jesus Christ, she knew it would work. And then 5 days later, she died in the hospital. Yet 20 years later, as I was laying on the freeway, I know she was with me. I'm sharing her story today as if my life depended on it, because it did then and it still does. Her example and her lifeless service is how she lived her life and how she died. Her life, her death, and her dream made such an impression on me. And because of what she taught me about Jesus Christ, I've chosen to live a life of service. Not all at once, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
What I learned from my mother as a little boy was and still is: find your dream, look to God for help, always keep going, and never, ever give up.
Absolutely. Wow. That's an amazing story. And all this occurred before you were 12 years old.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, Larry, a few years later, after the age of 12, at 17, during the height of the Vietnam War, you joined the military. Well, most people were trying to avoid the military. Why did you do that?
Well, after graduating from El Cerrito High School, I wanted to join the Marine Corps because I wanted to be the first one in my family to be a Marine. And I wanted to follow in the footsteps of my father, who felt that military service to this great country was important to defend our freedoms. He fought in the Army in World War I, in the trenches in France. And then at the end there, he got hit with mustard gas at the age of 23 years old. And he still lived to be 85 years old. And my grandfather was in the Union Army and fought in the Civil War. So since I was 17 years old, after graduation, I called my father, who was in Indiana at the time, to ask for his permission. Yeah, it's true. I was surprised also. He actually said, yes, you can go.
At 17.
Yeah. Well, that was 17 going to Marine Corps, but the Marine Corps didn't send me over till I was 18. So I went to the Marine Corps Recruiter Oakland and I enlisted in the Marine Corps. Well, when I arrived at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego, and any Marine you talk to, they will never forget standing on the yellow footprints. And then training by all the crawling through the sand pits, doing sit-ups, push-ups, pull-ups, running in place, and then running many miles with your assigned weapon. At that time was an M14 and an 80-pound pack on your back. Even though I was a squad leader, I was beginning to really wonder if I was going to make it through boot camp. Yet I did. And you know why? Because I never gave up. Along with our platoon, we all graduated from boot camp. Plus, I had earned the right to be called a Marine. I was then sent to Camp Pendleton in California, where I went through advanced infantry training. Well, that was fun, but I won't get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Since my MOS was 1811, then I went to Miramar Schools Battalion Track Vehicle School, where we were trained on the M48A3 tank and all its weapons at tank training down at Del Mar, California.
So you go to Vietnam as a very young man after your training, and you said to me one time, even while I was in Vietnam, I felt presence. I felt I was being protected. What was that?
Well, let me just let me show you. Here's a picture of the tank.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just enough to get your attention. Okay. So after completing tank training, I was shipped overseas to Vietnam, like you said, to the 3rd Marine Division, 3rd Tank Battalion, Charlie Company. We first landed in Da Nang and then was flown up to Quang Tri by C-130s. Well, let me tell you, if you've never been in a C-130, you don't know how noisy that thing is. Where I spent my beginning time and then also some other time in Dong Ha working on our tank, learning the jobs on the M48A3 tank. You know, they had a loader, they had a driver, they had a gunner, they had a tank commander positions, and practicing tank training maneuvers. After leaving Dong Ha, we were moved further north and east to an area near the mouth of the Qua Viet River, where it entered into the Gulf of Tonkin. This was just a short distance south of the DMZ.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the big border.
That's right.
I arrived in Quang Tri in March of 1968 during the Tet Offensive,
Mm-hmm.
which meant there was an always be prepared attitude in our area. Yes, we were always on the alert, preparing, watching, and waiting for the next potential North Vietnamese Army offensive. Now, I didn't know it then, being as young as I was, but I was being prepared for a life of service, even though at the time it felt more like hurry up and wait. Because during my time in Vietnam, we were exposed to intermittent sniper fire, incoming rockets and mortars, naval guns being fired over our heads into enemy positions. And well, I'll say one thing. The thing we worried about most with that was short rounds. You know, sometimes they wouldn't go where they were supposed to. And our tanks returning fire at the enemy to support our USMC grunts. Earlier, some of our tanks had been sent to Khe Sanh, which was a real death trap.
Mm-hmm.
So after being in Quang Tri for a few weeks and always being assigned to the less active areas, I think I figured out some of my leaders must have had young sons at home about my age. And since I was so young looking, here just to let you know.
Oh my God. You look like you're 12.
These leaders might be protecting me. Okay. And so again, this is my own personal thought. I was being blessed and watched over by my mother, which she promised. And and most important, the higher power, God, our Heavenly Father. Then came the best, well-timed surprise of my life. I, in country, received a letter from my older brother who was a lifer in the Air Force. And he told me in the letter how he was getting ready to retire, but he received orders to go to the Air Force Base near Pleiku, Vietnam. He spoke to his commanding officer and he explained that, hey, I'm retiring in a few weeks, and asked if he could get out of that Vietnam transfer. So his commanding officer asked him, well, do you have orders? And my brother said, yes, sir. The CO answered him, well, then you have to go.
Go.
So as soon as my brother landed in country, he wrote me a letter telling me to take that letter to my commanding officer the same day that I received it. So guess what I did? I did it. Okay. And 24 hours later, because two brothers were not allowed to be in the same combat zone, I was transferred to Okinawa to a place called MCAF Futima. That's a Marine Corps Air Facility. And it was at a dispensary. When I reported for duty, my CO asked me if I had a military driver's license. And I said, yes, sir. He said, for what? And I said, well, big trucks and the M48A3 tank. And he said, great, you'll be our next ambulance driver while you're here. So 2 weeks later, my brother went home from Vietnam to retirement. Thank you, thank you, thank you, big brother.
Yes.
So once again, I felt I was blessed and watched over by my mother, by my brother, and God. Now, while in Okinawa at the dispensary there in Fatima, I was assigned, like I said, as a driver and maintenance man for the air rescue vehicles and their gray ambulance. Now, the funny part about that gray ambulance looked exactly like that Pontiac ambulance on the show MASH.
Yeah.
And there I served and finished my enlistment until I was transferred back to El Toro, California, and given an honorable discharge in May of '69.
Excellent. What a story. So you get done, decide you're going to go back to school, meet your beautiful wife, Gail, finish school, and you started working as an accountant, which is about as far away from what you were as you could possibly imagine. What happened next?
Well, like you said, I returned home to lots of anti-Vietnam protests against the war. And I observed that we who had served in Vietnam were treated poorly.
Yes.
And especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, even though I love this area, we did not receive any type of warm welcome home greetings. Well, after I realized what was really going on at home, I adapted. I think that's might be the work for all of us. I went back to college. I kept preparing for my life of service by thanking God, my mother and brother, and watching over me and helping me get back home alive. Well, as soon as I returned home, I registered at the local college where I met my beautiful wife, Gail. Gail, you can stick your head in here. I want them to see. I met Gail. She was amazing. Okay. Still is. As she walked into the student union with her student nursing friends, I told a friend that I really wanted to meet her. And she told me I had to do something really special to get her attention. So I climbed up on a chair and jumped up on the table, smiling and waving both arms at her. Okay. Surprisingly, she came over.
And she still went out with you.
And that started a beautiful friendship of over 51 years, which really helped me continue my life of service because of one of her love languages is service. Mm-hmm. I began looking for that job you were talking about. I found one at the Standard Oil Richmond Refinery in Richmond, California, in the accounting department. And I loved it so much that it was within a few weeks, I began to look for a job in law enforcement. Okay. And applied at San Francisco PD. Now, the interesting part about that is they turned me down because I was a half-inch too short. Gail, who at that time was a student nursing nurse with Kaiser living in Oakland, told me Oakland PD was hiring, so I applied and they hired me. And guess what, Frank? Right before they hired me, Gail and I were married. After being hired, I started and graduated from the 65th OPD Academy. And later, when I was assigned with my field training officer as an Oakland PD rookie, I was awarded the department's Medal of Merit for trying to save the life of a drowning victim in Lake Merritt. Mm-hmm. Over the next 10 years, I was a member of Patrol Division, then Special Operations Section, then the SWAT team, solo motorcycles, hit and run accident investigators, field training officer, background investigator, and the Oakland Police Department Police Olympics departmental coordinator. Plus, at that time, I also competed and won the 1979 Police Olympics gold medal in powerlifting. My weight at the time was 148, and I was benching 300, squatting 380, and deadlifting 455 pounds. Wow. I was also a board member of the Oakland Police Officers Association. For my Oakland Police Officers Association service, I received the OPOA's Distinguished Service Award. Now, I got to tell you, Frank, I loved working for OPD. And all those very, very busy years there were always filled with opportunities for service and building friendships that would last me the rest of my life. Yet, at the same time, all my life, I've been training, preparing, and working out, getting in the best physical shape possible, trying to be prepared for anything.
Exactly.
Because of my mother's prophetic promise, I was prepared and ready to survive my close encounter with death, which was soon to come.
This is an incredible story. So as I was reading your story, and I've talked with you before, 11:30 p.m., August 21st, 1982. Is that the date? Tell the people what happened.
Well, as you said before, everything changed. All of us will face some kind of a change in our life. And I hope it's not this hard of a change. But while I was on duty, I was struck by a drunk driver in a 1967 Ford LTD who was traveling at 65 miles an hour. Well, I wasn't in a car. I'd already initiated a car stop on a different speeding car. And when that car finally came to a stop, I had to park in front of him on the Nimitz freeway. As I started to walk toward the safe side of his car, he opened the driver's door and started to get out. I immediately went to that door. I closed it, and I told him not to get out of the car because it was really dangerous out there. And here, I'll just show you. Here's a picture. Here, the car that hit me.
Mm-hmm.
If you can see just for a second there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yet, as I was standing there and closed his door, I'm saying this clearly, I was prompted to jump. I just was prompted to jump. And having been in combat zones and area, you kind of, I guess we would call it our gut reaction. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I jumped. And at that moment, I was struck in the hip and the right leg by a speeding car, a different speeding car at 65 miles an hour. Now, the force of that impact flipped me over the left front fender of the car I'd stopped, into the trunk of my police car, and into the back window, which shattered, and then flipped me up over the light bars and 40 feet down the freeway into the bushes. Okay, and here's to give you an idea, there's the back of the police car, the windows, etc.
Oh, goodness.
Well, Frank, that's when the real miracle started. Immediately, my ride-along, Doug Reinhardt, put out a call that an officer needs help at that location. Then he ran over to help me, holding me down because I was trying to get back on my feet. Okay, because in Vietnam, if you could get back to your feet, you were going to be all right. At least that's what we believed.
That's what we were trained. That's right.
Doug, seeing the blood pouring out of my right leg, reached into that open wound and pinched off or pushed on the femoral artery to try to stop or slow down the bleeding. The ambulance and the EMTs were there within 2 minutes. 2 minutes. That was unbelievable, yet very lucky for me. I was at the ER within 6 minutes. And by the time I got there, I had bled out and stopped breathing. And luckily, Doug and the EMTs had already started CPR. Another miracle is that there just happened to be a vascular surgeon and a trauma surgeon in the hospital at 11:30 p.m. that night. Dr. Udo, the trauma surgeon, was ready to go. So I was in surgery within 30 minutes. Since I had already bled out and stopped breathing, blood was critical for my survival. But surprisingly, there was plenty of A negative blood on hand. They put 54 pints of blood into me, 1 pint every 10 minutes. And after 9 major surgeries and a total of 110 units of blood, I was still alive. Yes, giving blood is the one gift that truly comes from our hearts. And it was this life-saving blood which saved my life that night.
Wow. 110 units of blood. That's incredible. That's incredible. Now, you're still in danger here. You've had something in the neighborhood of 15 surgeries over the next 48 hours, and you're still touch and go. So at what point did you believe or realize that, I'm going to survive this, I'm going to live?
Here are some of the miracles that helped me live through that night of 21 August. First, God said it wasn't my time to go.
Yeah.
That's easy. Second, because of those at the accident scene, the ride-along Doug and the EMTs, the OPD officers, and then the first line staff of the ER. And third, the blood donors, there was plenty of blood on the shelf. And fourth, Gail, who you just saw, and the family and friends who were with me every step of the way. And fifth, my testimony, and I will repeat it. Find your dream, go to God for help, and always keep going and never, ever give up. So one of the questions I always ask myself now, and I'm not sure I did at the time, but what am I supposed to learn from this journey I was on?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I found out that the more I helped other people, the less I worried about what was going to happen to me. So I was allowed to continue my path of life service with others. Now, a key to this plan was Aaron being born 7 months after the accident. He was my motivation to get started on the rehab recovery plan. And yes, it's true. Aaron and I learned to walk together. You were going to say something.
Wow, that's incredible. Now, every Marine I've ever met in my life, who becomes a first responder like you were, they're never going to give up. They're just not. And you've said that multiple times. And while you're in traction, while you're in the hospital, I heard you say, and Gail has confirmed this with me before, you were planning something major, some major event. What were you planning while you were still basically on death's door?
Well, I want to give special credit to all my children here.
Sure.
But what I was planning was I had this thought. Okay, I had this. I guess the best way to say it, the thought that I would that Aaron, that little boy, and I would ride across America with together in a nationwide blood drive, and I would watch him shake hands with the President of the United States. Now, I got to tell you, I had no idea. I didn't know how that would happen. Okay. I just knew it would happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I never gave up on that dream, even though it took 13 years. And part of my dream also included that I wanted to give back to the blood banks because of the 110 blood donors who gave blood to save my life. And just to let you know,
oh my God,
there's ICU. Well, one of the really neat parts is I woke up on our 13th anniversary. So Rob, a police friend of mine, had gotten some flowers and had gotten I just showed. Had gotten some flowers and a locket for me. And so I asked him, well, where's Gail? And he said, well, she's out in the hallway. I said, well, you please. Now this is I just woke up. So would you have her come in here? So when she came in, I said, happy anniversary, honey. And she looked at me and she goes, but I didn't get you anything. So being the typical Larry that I am, I said, what, you didn't think I was going to make it? Well, the bottom line is she, not only from that point and all the points before that, Gail carried me when I couldn't carry myself. And I hate to say it, she's probably still carrying me.
Mhm. She's
Okay.
amazing.
Basically, it took so long for that to get going. And what I was trying to do was get help from America's Blood Centers at that time, because we had just done what we call an ability across California with Easter Seals and the California Blood Banks. And at that same time, I was trying to organize and get help for the America's Blood Centers to do a combined nationwide blood drive and blood and a nationwide bicycle ride. Now, if you can imagine, because you've been involved in a lot of big things, I wasn't getting a lot of support until I had a conversation with Tom Schallert up in Eureka. He talked to Jim McPherson, the CEO at ABC at the time. Well, they both liked the dream and they both liked the story, so they gave me their support. And it's interesting because that's all it took for me to move forward on that crazy dream called Life Across America,
Mm-hmm.
which it happened in June '96. It was a nationwide blood drive with Larry, me, right? And my 13-year-old son, Aaron, riding 4,266 miles for the cause. Now that ride ended in Washington, D.C. at the Oval Office at the White House. And on the way, we had 191 blood drives, and they gathered 75,000 units of blood, resulting in the American Association awarding me something they call the President's Award. Well, to let you know how big this was, that combined nationwide bicycle ride and the blood drive had a blood drive every day for 60 days along the way. And they had local blood drives organized and advertised by the local America's Blood Center blood centers. Okay, I have a picture here, but it probably won't come through. But it's just a picture of the United States going from California to Maine and then down to Washington, D.C.
Wow. I got to ask you something, Larry.
Sure, jump in.
Being you, who you are, you're going to make that ride. There's no question about it. How did you convince your wife to let your 13-year-old son bicycle across the nation?
Well, it's going to be my answer. She'll have a completely different answer. But I started really practicing on two words that I had heard, and I thought it was a rumor, but it really works. I started practicing on "yes, dear." And we talked about it, but she probably knows me better than anybody else in this world. And she knew I had to do it. Is that correct, Gail?
Yeah.
She said yes. That was the short version.
That was a short version.
Fun to go.
Do you want to come here? And you just said, and
Aaron really wanted to go.
He did.
So I knew that I didn't have much of a battle against Larry, but I wasn't going to disappoint my son.
Good. When I first heard that story, I thought, thinking of my mother or my wife that was said, "What, are you out of your mind? You can go, but you're not taking my son."
I think that she said something similar, but it might have been in a foreign language. Anyway, that bicycle route and the stops along the way were organized and planned by America by Bicycle, which I think they've gone out of business now. They've going all the way from San Francisco to Maine. And then Aaron and I rode together with police escorts all the way from Maine to Washington, D.C. And yes, weather was a daily factor we had to deal with. The Life Across America marketing and the daily route organization, plus keeping track of all the blood units gathered, was handled by an incredible lady, Jennifer Schaffner. She was amazing, and she coordinated the connections and the contacts for us to meet the president at the White House in the Oval Office. And she gave her everything to make life across America a success and to make the dream of giving back successfully happen. So I want to say this with all my heart. In Jennifer's memory, because she died not too long after that, I want to thank her for her life of service.
Wow. So you made it across the country, you get to Washington, D.C. Now tell me, as a parent, what was it like to see your son in the Oval Office shaking hands with the President of the United States?
Well, I think I'll say one word 3 times. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Okay. So just so you can see this picture when we're talking about it, right after we made it and before we got to go to see the president,
There you are.
we took the picture of Aaron and I on the Capitol steps. That was the picture. And it took 13 years, Frank. So if any of your viewers out there have got a dream, it doesn't always happen in 10 minutes. So I want to remind you and them and myself, never give up on your dream. And then, as Gail reminded me several times, before we were invited to come in and see the president, she reminds me, it took a lot of patience to get in to see the president.
Imagine.
And we had to wait an additional 3 days. One thing for sure, you just don't drop in to see the president of the United States. Yet, the wait was worth it. When we thought it wasn't going to happen, guess what? It did. I received a phone call asking me not only if I wanted to come in and see the president with Aaron, but if I'd like to bring the rest of the family for a family picture.
Wow.
Boy, was I excited. Yes, yes, yes. And so they scheduled that the next day. And
I'm sure you have a picture of that.
oh, yeah.
And there it is. Wow.
Okay. And then just let you know, that's what the family is growing to now. We have 6 kids and 20 grandchildren.
Wow. So you have been blessed, my friend. God
Yeah.
reached out for you and your mother and your brother.
Yep. And so it was interesting, though, you know, having been in law enforcement, when we got to the White House, Frank, security was I was well aware of security, very thorough, very tight. They had us wait in the press secretary's office until they were ready to take us into the Oval Office. Gail said she had to keep a close eye on our kids. I'm not sure what that means, but they weren't allowed to go to any other rooms or touch computers or just, you know, be kids.
Your kids, right?
She said what saved them and us was that they furnished the kids with a lot of treats and snacks. And while I was waiting with Aaron and the family, and then after we went into the Oval Office, I was watching another blessing or a miracle, I guess I could say, take place in my life. You know, that dream, that thought I had that someday I would watch Aaron, I'd ride across America and watch him shake hands with the president. Yes, I stood there and I watched him shake hands with President Bill Clinton. And then we took our family picture with the president, which I just showed in the office. All I can say is, wow, thank you, thank you, thank you. And what an attitude of gratitude you learn from something like that.
Oh, absolutely. That's just an incredible story. Now, Larry, we're just about out of time for this episode. What last thoughts do you want to leave with the viewers around the world here today? You've got such an amazing story. You've had such an amazing life of service.
Well, I think I would like to repeat what my mother, what I learned from my mother as a little boy. And that was, and it still is. Find your dream, look to God for help, and always keep going, and never, ever give up. And Frank, if you and your viewers could only feel the unconditional love that we, the blood recipients, have for the blood donors, you would be overwhelmed with compassion and gratitude. And that's why I'm so grateful for this opportunity to speak with you, because it gives me a chance to share this message. God's gift to us is our life. Our gift to him is what we do with it. Plus, I found out on my journey, it's usually a blessing in disguise. And it may take us many years before we really understand it, that we're going to learn as we go along. So my story about life-saving blood, I wanted to always remind you that you too have the opportunity to live a life of service by helping others to achieve their dreams and their goals. And sometimes all it takes and all they need is a smile, a hug, a handshake, a kind word, and a unit of blood, or maybe more than one unit of blood. So, Frank, I'd like to conclude with a scripture that I believe is a spotlight, not only for my life, but for many of the lives of your amazing viewers. It's Luke 2:52, and Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. And by donating blood, we are serving others. And I would like to share my testimony of Jesus Christ. It's my deep-seated conviction and continuing conversion that Jesus is the Christ. Without Jesus Christ's mercy, I would have died that night on the freeway. And I would have missed this opportunity of being able to bear my testimony and share my testimony to you and your viewers, that I know Jesus Christ is our Savior, Redeemer, and our friend. And I want to thank you and mention one other name, which you may get into a little later, is I want to thank Kate Fry for all she does to help save people's life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone who gives blood is a hero, and everyone who gives blood is saving someone's life. As I said, Larry, we're just about out of time, Larry and Gail, but thank you so much for this story. I've heard it before, and it inspires me every time. I almost get goosebumps listening to it. Now, to see more about Larry's story, the whole story, and the talk that he gives to the blood community every year as his award, the President's Award, it'll be in the book, Business Secrets from the Battlefield to the Boardroom. Larry's story and several other veterans and veteran spouses and families are also wrote stories for that book. It'll be out in March. Now you can see this on ROKU TV or on my YouTube channel, Frank Zaccari. If you see it on the YouTube channel, please subscribe. Let me leave you with this as I do every week. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Larry and Gail showed us where many of those rocks are. Thank you again.